Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. There you go. I found the mute button after all. Good morning. How you doing? It is Monday, July 1st, 2024. Time for another month. A month of shows. A month of everything. A little bit of everything today. It is July 1st. Lots of things going on today. Greg Dworkin will be with us. For those of you, I think America suffered on Friday for not having Greg Dworkin around to tell you what to think of the debate. I guess. I don't know. We'll find out in a few minutes whether that was a huge mistake or everything is just fine. And lots of reaction over the weekend. Lots of things to round up. If you are a New York Times reader, you are, I'm sorry, and you're unfortunate enough, I guess, to be faced with a Bill Maher opinion piece on what the Democrats should do post-debate and why he wants an open convention. And probably for a lot of you, that will be the last thing you need to hear about whether or not there should be an open convention. What? Bill Maher says it? No, I don't think so. Well, I don't know. Anyway, never been of interest to me what Bill Maher had to say about pretty much anything. And that's not one of them either. We've got some things we can read and share with you today that I think will put things in perspective. But yes, there's no denying that most people spent the weekend saying, yeah, that was the worst thing I've ever seen in a debate performance, or at the very least, it was that was the worst one I've ever seen. I still haven't seen it. So, that, or no, you don't understand. This is something completely different and kind, and we must act immediately. I will say this is something that will come up in a piece that I've got socked away here. My mom sent me one from Heather Cox Richardson, but quoting, what's the name of that guy again? We'll get around to it, but one of the Republican operatives who's very familiar to us, never Trumper, etc. So we hear his name all the time. I just can't bring it to mind at the moment. But the quote was a good one. Don't day trade politics. There was more to it. Don't day trade politics. It's a sucker's game, etc. But that's something that, I don't know. That sounds like good advice. I mean, I think so, right? Don't day trade anything. Don't day trade really is a bad, that's good advice generally. But the idea being, don't set your political course based on any one day's snap judgment on anything. It's a long time to November. And many things may happen, including getting your way if you're one of the people who wants to see someone other than Biden head the ticket. But then, of course, we find ourselves in the thicket of, well, if then it is not in your mind Kamala Harris, why not? Explain yourself. And there's a lot of politics involved in that one, too. And, that one strikes me as most difficult to escape from because, of course, if you're in the camp of, well, the American people, speaking for the American people, and that's something I love to do, by the way, speaking for the American people, they are going to be very upset. They were told that Biden was okay and he's not okay. And so therefore you've lied to us and you've misled us about our political leadership. And we're very angry and you can only placate us with somehow, I don't know, some senator who retires and leaves a red seat open. Thanks a lot. Something like that. I don't know. Hopefully you can construct something better than that. But if you're in that camp, I don't know how you get out of so you're also saying that you were just kidding the whole time about Kamala Harris being in the line of succession to the presidency, like now that it's a possibility that we might need her. You told us with the oldest president ever elected for 4 years that the person you wanted backing him up was Kamala Harris. And now you're like, no, just kidding. But trust me, I'll pick somebody this time that I really definitely do want. If you're speaking for the American people or the Democratic Party or whatever, and you're trying to, if you're of the mind that you need to regain the trust of the people who you think you may have lost by telling them that Biden was going to be okay, I don't know how you improve the trust picture by saying also the person that the last 4 years should have been, second in line, a heartbeat away, is now a heartbeat away. Man, never mind. And that comes with a whole set of politics beyond that in the black community, in various, any minority community that looked toward Kamala Harris's place on the ticket with hope and is now suddenly finding out, oh yeah, okay, so that's the party that's just kidding when it comes to, hey, this might really happen. I see how it is. And that's not going to help things either. Anyway, we'll get to it, I'm sure. Greg Dworkin has plenty to round up on that front, I am positive, although the actual answer is in Skype. And what can I tell you? I was looking elsewhere because it's also July 1st is Steve Bannon Goes to Jail Day, and that's very important, and I'll repeat it because the ringy-dingy went right over my face. The thing I've been waiting to say for a long time, Steve Bannon goes to jail today. And I just want to remind everybody, if you're nervous about things or whatever, there is messaging available out there. Not only that the other guy is a convicted felon, but that so far, by the way, he's only been convicted of things that we can convict him of, despite the fact that all the witnesses to his other crimes are going to jail rather than admit the crimes. Steve Bannon goes to jail today for contempt of Congress, and the bottom line of that one is that Steve Bannon, as Scott likes to call him, Steve KG Bannon, Steve Bannon preferred going to jail to telling the truth about January 6th and what Donald Trump did. He'd rather go to jail than tell people that, because if he tells people the truth about it, Donald Trump will go to jail for what he did on January 6th. And rather than have that be the case, he'll go to jail. Peter Navarro is in jail for the same reason. Mike Flynn went to jail for the same reason, different crime, but same reason, and then eventually got pardoned. Roger Stone went to jail, same reason. And so if you're still scratching your head about January 6th or Ukraine or Russia, and what Donald Trump did and why he never gets caught and why he never seems to be on tape saying the thing you need to send him to prison, the answer is that a dozen other people have agreed to serve those prison terms instead, rather than tell the truth about what happened and what they know. So, there was a bad debate also. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Hey, this hasn't been the greatest 96 hours in politics ever.
No, it's not. There.
I have to tell you in advance, I have a bit of a laryngitis.
You're fired. You have to be replaced.
Exactly. And it's really not good to try to hide that from people. You really should tell them that up front.
Yes, well, there you go. You've done it.
Like if you have a conversation. So I'm just telling you.
All right. Well, I'll see you replaced.
So,
yeah.
Question for you is: do you want to deal with the grandpa elephant in the room first, or do you want to do the Supreme Court first?
Well,
since they're going to start ruling stuff at 10 o'clock.
Why don't we deal with the other stuff first of all? And at 10 o'clock, we'll get around to the SCOTUS closer to 10 o'clock. How about that?
Okay. So we'll do the grandpa elephant in the room first.
Yes.
Okay. You didn't watch a debate because you usually don't watch debates?
Yes. It wasn't in so much because I was boycotting, but because I kind of know these two guys.
Right. So did I, but I watched it anyway.
Yeah, people are supposed to.
And it was a debacle. It was just as bad as you've heard it is. It was worse.
That is, well, I can't say that that's what I've heard. That is what I've heard. I can't say it's bad, worse than I think, because I've spent the weekend thinking about how it's supposed to be worse than I think. So now I don't know what I think.
The second half of it was okay for Biden. The first half just started out terribly. He was...
that is what I hear.
He was unable to articulate the reasons why he was running and what points were most important.
Well, that seems like
what you get is a result
thing.
That the American public, according to CBS News YouGov poll, 72% say he shouldn't be running for president. That's just a terrible place to find yourself in.
Yes, that would be bad.
That's bad.
And it is bad right now.
Now, the only saving grace is Trump also did terribly, but in a completely different way.
Yes.
You know, he was relaxed, confident, and lying his butt off and doing a gish gallop sort of thing, which is what he does at these things.
Big usage of that terminology over the weekend.
So gish galloping means you just spew so many lies, one after the other, one after the other. You don't have time to fact check each and every one of them.
Yeah.
And Biden, with his stutter, was simply in no position to do that. So, you know, it was bad. And the problem is that it undermined one of the basic tenets of the Biden campaign, that this ought not to be a referendum on me because things are going okay enough.
Yeah.
You really need to look at Trump and what he's doing and what he wants to do. And instead, this debate made it a referendum on Biden, which is why you've seen the press coverage, part of the reason why you've seen the press coverage over the past, 96 hours.
Okay.
Now, there's another factor to that, and this isn't an excuse. It's observation. It's just the way it is. Okay? There's a lot of people in the press that don't like Biden because Biden doesn't like them and doesn't respond to them and are more than pleased that he's in trouble and are milking this for everything so that they could say, you see, I was right all along. He should have interviewed with us. He should have done this. He should have done that. And it turns my stomach to see it, but, you got to accept the reality that that's the way it is. And it's one of the many reasons why Biden and the Democrats don't really listen to what the New York Times thinks Biden should do.
Yes.
There's no love lost there. On the other hand, it doesn't help him in any way, shape, or form. So you step back and you look at the situation and say, well, what's going on going forward? First of all, it doesn't come at a good time because Biden was already at best tied and more likely at this moment in time trailing even before the debate. This was the time to reset the campaign and start things, and it failed to do that, so that's not good. Okay. Gretchen Whitmer, according to news stories, told Biden, Michigan's in trouble now, so, it's not that we can't win, but we got a lot of work to do. That's all true. You have the press, who've definitely turned on them and don't see Trump's lies as a story. Philadelphia Inquirer was the only paper that I know of, only major paper, to say Trump should step down from the race and not run. Everybody else said Biden should.
One of the most frustrating outcomes possible, but
Right. And Brian Stelter, the media critic, had an observation which got everybody angry. It's unfortunately true, but it got everybody angry and said basically long ago the press decided that there's no point in covering Trump's failures because the GOP audience doesn't care.
Yes.
But the Democrats do care about Biden's foibles, failures, and flaws, so they're going to cover that because they want eyeballs.
I guess.
Doesn't have to be fair.
Right.
But it's probably an accurate observation. So there's no reason getting mad at Brian because he said it. It's probably true.
Okay. I had no plans to get mad at him.
Okay. So a couple of days ago, Osita Nwanevu made this point. Voters think Biden is too old. Journalists think Biden is too old. Behind the scenes, Democratic officials think Biden is too old. Beyond risking a loss, Biden's contributing to the feeling nothing matters and is corroding the faith in politics he promised to restore. That's the message that came out of that debate and why it was so devastating.
Okay.
It isn't just people saying, oh, it was a bad night, it was a one-off. It's more stepping back and saying, well, what does this all mean? And why do people do that? Because we're Democrats. That's what we do. Right? We're not MAGA. We don't just line up in a cult and say, well, I'll support the party leader no matter what. It's interesting that Biden raised a ton of money after that debate. The base did rally around him.
Yes.
And some of the most stalwart of all, and you brought this up in your intro, some of the most stalwart of all of the defenders of Biden were the never-Trumpers.
Mm.
And I don't know which one made the day trader point, but let me give you Mike Madrid, for example.
It wasn't him, but it was someone equally illiterate.
More data coming in from the battleground states, according to Jeff Garin. I'm finishing my second battleground state post-debate, and both surveys show the same thing. Debate had no effect on the vote choice. The election was extremely close and competitive, and it still is. More data coming in from the battleground states, Mike Madrid said after Jeff Garin said that. If the Democratic base holds, and it sure as hell looks like it is, Biden's in a stronger position than he was. Get your swords and shields and march down the damn battlefield. Stuart Stevens.
That's it. That's who I was thinking of.
Said,
the other alliterative guy.
Sarah Longwell, earnest question. And Sarah Longwell has always hated Kamala Harris, so you have to figure that in whenever you look at, what she suggests people should do. Again, another never-Trumper. Earnest question, do you think Trump would be pleased or nervous if he were suddenly running against some combination of Whitmer, Shapiro, Booker, Newsom, Moore, etc.? And notice it doesn't include Harris because she hates Harris. And Stuart Stevens says, sure, it's easy. He'd be relieved. The message from the Democratic Party would be, well, I guess Trump was right and Biden isn't up to it. We'll give it another shot. Eventually we'll pick somebody and we'll get it right. And, hey, trust us to lead the country. That's not a good situation either. So basically, the never-Trumpers are saying, buck up and go with the horse you rode in on.
I see.
And with some exceptions, Tim Miller and Radio Free Tom, are basically saying, you know what, Tom Nichols, this is bad. Nichols said the whole theory of an early debate was that it would turf Trump and end speculation about Biden, making the election outcome seem inevitable, and it backfired, putting Biden where Trump was supposed to be. That's not one bad night. It's the implosion of a strategy.
Well,
I think he's right about that.
Yeah, that may be something bigger. Okay.
Right. So just carrying on as if nothing happened is childish. Millions of people voted for Biden after the debate. They have a right to know if he can carry on the campaign they entrusted to him. It's not panic. It's not betrayal. It's just democracy. So here's the thing, as I see it. Okay, and I'm going to quote you just a quick summary from Jamie Dupree, who I think he has a pretty sharp political eye. The bottom line is, what does the mix of evidence tell me, the polls, the responses, et cetera? That most Democrats are ready to stick with Biden because they can't stomach the idea of Trump winning in November. It also tells me there are still very major concerns about Trump because we certainly didn't see any immediate bump for him in the polls. And you have all these voters coming out and saying, I would vote for Biden's head floating in a bucket of formaldehyde before I would ever vote for Donald Trump. So Trump did not win any votes from this debate. I think that's pretty established at this point. The only question is, what do the Biden voters do? The double haters still hated both of them. They didn't really change.
Yeah, well, that's how it happened.
Biden perhaps lost a little bit from them, but they didn't know who they were going to vote for anyway. They don't want to vote for Trump. They have to decide about whether they're going to vote for Biden or stay home. So that's the overall big picture. But I think all of that sort of, glides around the heart of the matter. Is Biden competent or is he not? Have people been hiding it, or is it simply not true? Did he really just have a bad night, or is he incapable of governing? And if we don't know the answer to that, it's really hard to know what the next steps are supposed to be.
Yes. Well, it's hard to know, even if we do know the answer. That's hard to figure out the next steps anyway. I know what you'd like to do, but
right. So the right-wing press is
tough.
Accusing the mainstream press of hiding Biden's senility. McKay Coppin said, look, if everybody in the press knew Biden was this bad and deliberately hid it from the public to help him get reelected, what do they think was going to happen at the nationally televised debate? These theories don't withstand like 5 seconds of critical thinking.
No, I mean, and of course, if the mainstream press had any inkling that they really could prove that he was in this condition despite all the insistence that he was not, they would have run it in a heartbeat. That they couldn't wait to run that story.
Right.
They'd love it.
So, and people who have worked with him say it's not true, And so, I'm going with that as a baseline. It's just that watching the debate, doesn't make you feel totally 100% certain that's right.
To say the least. Yes, okay.
That's the problem. So, my view is Biden should stay in for now, and he needs to get out there and do town halls and other things to convince people he can do this. Yes. And if he can't do
Apparently
that,
he had an event right after.
If he is incapable of doing that, then get out.
I guess
give it to Harris and let Harris run.
Yeah, that brings us, I guess, to that question as well.
There is nobody else besides Harris.
There shouldn't be. And
everybody who starts listing a bunch of white people who should run instead of Harris don't get it. The other interesting thing is that when you talk to the people who are actually running the focus groups about what happened after the debate, black voters thought he won, Biden.
Okay.
Hispanics were uncertain what to make of it, partly because they were looking at Trump and trying to figure out what the heck was going on there. They didn't react as positively to Biden and negatively to Trump as others, but they did. White unmarried women in particular really reacted negatively to Trump.
Okay. Yes.
So again, the problem is that, and the double haters, did not react well to Biden, but the changes pre and post, when you look at the focus groups, weren't all that great. So the point that the people who are running these groups are saying is that a lot of the Biden is too old stuff has already been baked into why everybody is voting the way they are, which is one of the reasons why it was essentially a tied race and not a Biden lead. So did that really change anything? Long term, it certainly could. I'm not willing to say, okay, well, those are the only things that are going to happen. There was a poll that showed Biden went up after the debate. There was a poll that showed Biden went down by a point or two. There's really not a lot of information about the effect of this, but the effect of this is going to take a while to seep in. Then we have two other factors. Factor one is that July 4th is coming up and people are going to take a 4 or 5 day break.
Let's start now.
And it's interesting because, again, when you talk to regular people, there's a lot of folks who haven't even heard a thing about the debate.
Yeah,
it wasn't watched nearly as much as the other debates.
Yeah.
Because people like you said, I know these guys. I don't have to watch it.
For slightly different reasons. But, ultimately we said the same thing. I know what's going on. They may not, but...
and then the other thing, of course, is the
plenty of
immunity
people
ruling.
are familiar with them. Yes, I'm sorry.
Which, as Joe Biden might say, is a BFD.
Yeah.
There's other rulings, too, though, so probably we'll do those after the break, because they're all important, and they all have to do with the Supreme Court trying to dismantle the regulatory state, and not necessarily in a way that helps ordinary people and consumers.
Not at all.
So the two other cases, well, three, but two are combined. One of them is called Corner Post, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But it's a group challenging the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System's regulations about swipe fees retailers can be charged for financial institutions when customers use their debit cards. And that sounds really super technical, but it's really important because what they're really doing is challenging the statute of limitations by which corporations can sue the government for I don't like this regulation.
Oh, well, yeah.
And that's why that case is important, Corner Post.
Okay.
The others are the Texas and Florida attempts to regulate Facebook in terms of what they're allowed to moderate and what they're not allowed to moderate. And conservative states sued in order to say that it's not right that they're trying to regulate conservative speech. And not only do we not want them to regulate content, we want them to tell us what their moderation standards are. We want them to make it totally transparent. Problem with that is that essentially it gives a roadmap to predators trying to reach children on these social media sites exactly how the companies are dealing with getting rid of their posts, and that's not helpful. to say the least.
Yeah, well, that won't be helpful. It's astonishing what, I guess it's just so gimmitarian, the idea of Florida and Texas in particular being on this particular case. It's so odd that you have conservatives out there who say you have to be completely transparent and tell us what your algorithm is for moderation of these social media sites, but also no one is allowed to look at the coding of the voting machines, which they now, of course, have switched positions because they keep losing elections, and the conspiracy theory has to change to cover that. Oh, well, now we want to look at the coding of the voting machines because we figure since we're losing, it must be rigged in the machines.
It's also interesting that these are among the last cases.
Yeah.
Because the Supreme Court appears to be struggling with its self-imposed mandate to dismantle the regulatory state. And what happens if that goes too far?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the problem they have. Okay, the government shouldn't regulate anything, but what if we don't regulate this at all and just let anybody do anything like predators on these platforms? Is that really what we want?
I guess. I don't know. It's what Elon Musk
What if we don't regulate anything and then all of a sudden we make it so that everybody could sue everybody about everything because there aren't any rules?
Yeah.
And how do you actually conduct finance and stable commerce under those circumstances? So they're wrestling with that.
Yeah, well,
that's one of the reasons why I think they put it off for last.
Yes, they need to do some fact-finding trips to Somalia to figure out how are they working it over there in warlord territory, and can we do this? Do I, as a Supreme Court justice, earn enough money to employ a private army so I can live in an underground doomsday bunker for the rest of my life?
Yeah, what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, I have to weigh all of these things and figure it out. Yeah, to hell with regulation of everything. Everybody can go and clobber a Supreme Court justice if you want to.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. By the way, I've been replaced on the show for being too senile. I don't know. We'll have to find out. There's going to be an open convention tomorrow, and we'll see who hosts. It could be anybody. I don't know. Oh. So it won't be Joan, though, because she was second in line for Tuesdays. But no, we were just kidding. We're chucking her out, and could be anybody.
Well, that's the thing. Joan was the obvious person to take over, and nobody agrees to want her.
Right. It's crazy. And all right. Well, at any rate, we were on the Supreme Court. We had moved off of that.
This is an article from WMUR pointing out that this immunity ruling is one of several this term that could impact the court's reputation, as a new poll reinforces public confidence is eroding. Yes. Most people that I've talked to think this is a political decision, this immunity thing, and it's just further evidence of what the poll results show, that the justices are favoring Trump or helping Trump avoid trial, said American University law professor Stephen Wormiel. I'm not in that camp. I think the court's going to issue what, in its mind, is a major constitutional decision. Well,
I think so.
No. Actually, both can be true at the same time. According to the latest Associated Press Nork Center survey, 7 in 10 Americans think justices are more influenced by ideology than impartiality. Well, that's because it's true.
Yeah. We've kind of watched that happen for a while now. And
this sentiment appeared to grow after the court's conservative majority struck down federal abortion protections 2 years ago. And even though recent abortion decisions have been more measured, like with mifepristone, the High Court allowed Idaho hospitals to provide emergency abortions when a mother's health is at risk, at least temporarily. Mm-hmm. The decisions left the door open for future legal challenges, leaving advocates on both sides feeling uneasy. And that's true. They didn't really decide. They decided not to decide for now.
Yes.
They decided not to decide the worst possible case for now until the election happens, in other words.
They do tend to do, well, even the old school Supreme Court used to try to do that. For if they don't have to, that was, it's one of their judicial canons. If you don't have to decide it, don't.
If you don't have to decide it, you don't have to take the case.
Yeah, right.
And then if you look at it and decide you really screwed up by taking the case, you can dig it.
That's true, too.
As we learned.
Yeah, right.
Which doesn't happen very often.
No, it's better if they recognize up front what's going on.
So let's talk about these other cases besides the immunity one.
Okay.
So the first one comes up with Florida and Texas suing to try to establish for themselves the proper way to moderate social media. The laws at the center of the fight, Florida's SB 7072 and Texas HB 20. Remember, the states aren't suing. They passed these laws, and the social media groups are suing.
Okay.
Okay. They were created in the name of countering what conservative legislators have labeled censorship by social media platforms. And this is from a piece from The Verge. Florida's rule directs platforms to moderate content in a consistent manner. Texas prohibits discrimination on the basis of viewpoint. In other words, you can't kick me off because I'm conservative. NetChoice, which is an industry group that counts Meta, Google, and TikTok. I didn't see Twitter in there. Among its members, promptly challenged the laws for violating the First Amendment. NetChoice argued the laws ignore the rights of platforms to exercise editorial discretion in what they show in their sites.
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem that the NetChoice group has is it was an immediate challenge. It was what's called a facial challenge, which is to say they just challenged the entire concept of what you were doing.
Okay.
And that may be too broad for these conservative justices.
And
the reason I say that is because throughout the arguments, the oral arguments that were happening, the justices, according to the Verge article, repeatedly name-check companies whose primary function has nothing to do with hosting users' views. Etsy, Uber, Venmo. What? These are online companies, and the justices are trying to figure out how are they different or how are they the same as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Google. Because they're all online.
Yeah, really.
So if, they're very different.
Yeah,
the function is different.
How is
but they were struggling with
McDonald's
so they're trying to say, well, how can you have a rule that covers all situations when some of these companies are different?
Well, they do different things. Yeah, this is one of the issues with, the Supreme Court and judges in general, and I guess bringing us back to the Chevron deference case that was just decided that essentially courts saying no more of this relying on government experts and people who really understand the technicalities of these issues inside and out. No longer will we defer to them. Judges can, if they feel like something's wrong with this, you can intervene and impose your own standard instead. Like putting Ted Stevens in charge of regulating the internet. It's a series of tubes.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. So basically, a lot of politics in this, of course. There were politics for why the laws were passed in the first place.
Yeah, sure.
And then the NetChoice group, which are the social media companies that sued, made a decision to sue early. with a facial challenge rather than wait and collect data as to how things were harming people, and then do what would be known as an as-applied challenge.
I see, yes.
An as-applied challenge would mean the laws are unconstitutional only as applied to a specific set of circumstances, but you need the data to back that up. Net Choice in the group apparently made a decision, a political decision, that if they challenge early, perhaps they could stop other states from doing this because they know it's going to be challenged and it'll be in the courts. And that may have succeeded. And may have been a short-term strategy by not doing the as-applied approach, which would have taken longer. They give the Supreme Court leeway to make whatever rules they want to because they're the Supreme Court.
Yes.
So that's the issue, and that's why nobody really knows exactly how they're going to decide. This court tends to find some reason to find something to appease the conservatives in every ruling, but in some cases they'll find something to appease everybody else too, like they did with the Mifepristone ruling, which is to say, leave things as they are till we figure it out later. Okay, why didn't they just say no? Because that wouldn't have pleased the conservatives.
Right, okay.
Why didn't they just say yes? Because that would have pissed off 70% of the country. So they do a lot of baby splitting.
For pro-lifers, they sure do.
For pro-lifers, it's just such an odd situation.
Yeah.
Let's split the baby. Well, Solomon pointed out how bad an idea that was. Don't you know anything about, historical religious texts?
We mean, Well, okay, yes. So we'll be on the lookout for that one.
So be on the lookout for that.
That's
the contours behind, how to react to how they decide.
Okay.
And, of course, as always, the devil's in the details. Then there's this other case called Corner Post.
Yeah, what's this?
Versus Federal Reserve. And it sounds really wonky.
All right.
Okay. And this comes from American Progress. Okay. On February 20th, 2024, oral arguments will be heard, because this was written in January of 2022.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry, that's where the picture is. Sorry. This was from February of 2024. So on February of 2024, oral arguments will be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in Corner Post versus the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, or as the lawyers always write it, Corner Post v. Board of Governors. On its face, this case deals with the maximum swipe fees retailers can be charged by financial institutions when customers use their debit cards. At its heart, however, Corner Post is intended to allow a swarm of legal challenges to rules that have protected the American people from bad actors and corporate malfeasance for decades.
Oh, can't have that.
Many of these rules and regulations are taken for granted every day by Americans, most of whom are unaware that billionaires and corporations are taking steps to undermine these bedrock protections. The petitioner in this case, and the groups that filed supporting briefs, claim that the 6-year statute of limitations to facially challenge a final action by a federal government agency, in this case a rule or reg under the Administrative Procedure Act, begins ticking not when the action was finalized, but at any time an individual party is injured. That means that if a corporation decides that regulating how I charge my fee 35 years after the regulation was passed, I can still challenge it. And that means you can challenge it forever. There's no finalization. As long as you have the money and the will to challenge these things, regulations will be challenged ad infinitum as far as you can see the sunset.
Well, like the approval of Mifepristone, actually.
So the tenuous reading of the law would effectively eliminate statute of limitations to challenge federal rules as illegal, arbitrary, or capricious everywhere.
Fantastic.
And that's why it's important, even though it seems really wonky.
Yeah, I mean...
swipe fees, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is basically
deal,
you're opening up the door for corporations to sue the government at any time for anything forever.
Yes, not just swipe fees, but even just swipe fees itself. I mean, if you really think about how often do you use credit cards? Yes. Would you like it to cost you 100%, 200%, 300% more to do so? No. well then, guess what? You're interested in regulating swipe fees. Oh, but
so they write, Corner Post is about more than the specific debit card rule. The case appears to be part and parcel of an expansive legal project to dismantle federal agencies and undermine the government's ability to protect Americans from the harmful acts of corporations. Mm-hmm. Just this term, Securities and Exchange Commission versus Jarski, for example, the court appeared to open arguments, and they were, that federal agencies' enforcement powers are unconstitutional, so they certainly limited them. Suck. And in Loper Bright versus Raimundo, the court is poised to cripple or strike the 40-year-old legal doctrine known as Chevron deference, which they did, by which Congress grants expert agencies deference in interpreting the governing statutes. So given that they did Jarksi, and given that they did Chevron deference, it's really hard to know how they're going to rule in Corner Post.
Yeah. They could go whole hog, I suppose, but I don't. Or this may be one of those things where they say, "No, look, we're reasonable. We gave one side 2 wins and the other side 1, and that was the best we could do."
Right.
And I don't know. I don't know how I can predict that one. I certainly haven't followed the cases closely enough to try, but. There's a lot of danger in this, and the idea that the justices seem, for some reason, really interested in flirting with the idea that, what if we didn't regulate anything at all? Wouldn't we be okay? Because after all, we have federal security teams and lifetime appointments and a pretty good salary, and apparently it's also okay to give us gratuities as well. So we figure it's all going to be okay, but maybe not. And, like the old problem we have of trying to figure out why a post-apocalyptic situation, billionaires' guards continue to guard their underground bunkers rather than just saying, to hell with it, at a minimum, to hell with it, we're leaving. I don't know why. They just sort of think they'll always have this protection. So, I don't know. I mean, it's an unusual thing, to say the least, but I guess it takes that kind of person and that kind of confidence in your entitlement to regular life to think that no one really needs protection of any kind from the government.
So here's the bad news. Anthony Michael Kreese, the Georgia State law professor,
yes,
says, here's my guess for the final decisions today.
Oh, dear. Yes.
Okay. Net choice, Barrett. That's not so bad, potentially. She could be pretty reasonable about stuff sometimes. Okay, the bad news, Corner Post, Alito. So if Alito's writing the opinion, it's bad.
Oh, okay.
Right, and then Trump immunity is going to be Roberts.
This is the guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the guess it'll be an 8-1 decision with Thomas dissenting.
Yeah, once again, the comment that comes to mind about it, and we haven't seen whether this has happened yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. And somebody had this great comment a couple of days ago about how even when it should otherwise be 9-0 decision, the people who provide him with free yacht vacations
and RVs,
they want their receipts. Show me that my gratuities are going to a good cause. Go out there. I want you to go out there and embarrass yourself, even if it's otherwise unanimous. You vote no, otherwise no vacations for you, and he has to do it. It's kind of embarrassing. Oh well, that was the deal he took, I guess.
So, to give you an idea of just how good the discourse is these days, apparently Donald Trump just reposted an image on Truth Social calling Liz Cheney guilty of treason and for her to be prosecuted in televised military tribunals.
Oh, okay. Well, then he's stable enough to be president.
Right. So Larry Sabato looked at that and said, every editorial board that demanded Biden's withdrawal has to demand Trump's withdrawal. Or do you just sit idly by when he does stuff like this?
Well, apparently they just sit idly by. I mean, they sit idly by for everything. And this is just Trump being Trump in their minds, and they don't know how to approach it. And I don't know. It's very weird. Like, I guess, I don't know. For them to say now that no, he should drop out because he's not mentally capable of being president means I guess is a problem for them too. Like, okay, well, how come you didn't recognize this 4 years ago, 8 years ago? Where were you? I mean, he's been saying this since forever, and you decided to pretend it was all going to be okay during his administration. And now you're concerned with, what happens if the president isn't capable of leading? He was telling people to inject disinfectant. He was telling people to drink their fish tanks and to eat the horse medicine, and that he was smarter than everybody because his uncle taught at MIT. Like, you missed the boat on demanding that people resign. Sorry. Maybe that's just not a function newspapers can carry out.
And to round out today's hour,
yes,
hour's worth of 20 minutes or 20 minutes worth of an hour, however you look at it.
Yeah, or an hour and 20
minutes.
Since
I traditionally am on the show to talk around 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about some overseas elections.
All right. Do they have those?
France had the first round of their 2-round election yesterday.
2 rounds. That's France. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, well, we do 2 rounds.
And here's how it works.
Okay.
You run for a seat in the assembly.
Here I go.
Okay.
Yes.
The top 2 candidates, plus anybody who gets more than 12.5%, goes on to the runoff.
Ooh la la. Yeah. Okay. So that's round 1.
So that's round 1 today.
Okay. That's a primary.
Results today, voting yesterday. And then round 2 is next week. And round 2 really decides who wins.
Okay.
Okay. So the far right bloc as a whole got 33% of the vote. That's 1 or 2 points less than people thought they would.
Okay.
The left bloc, the Front Populaire, the new Popular Front.
The old one is not very popular anymore. Yeah.
Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. I always have to remember which one is which.
Yes.
So the left bloc, that's from the Monty Python movie, not from current politics. Left bloc got 28 to the far right's 33.
Yeah, okay.
Macron's bloc, which called for the elections, got 20. And the Conservative Party got 7.
Oh. Okay. So if the Macron's bloc, which is presumably moderate,
center right,
if they're
definitely center compared to the far right.
If they were to align with the
the
left bloc, you'd have something there.
Correct. So,
gotcha. All right.
This is parliamentary maneuvering. So the far right bloc wins the most votes, but doesn't come close to a majority. They will in individual districts.
Right,
but
I see.
Across the board, they don't win a majority.
Okay, 33%.
The left bloc is in a strong second place.
28.
And the Macron bloc is in a weak third place.
Yeah,
and the Conservative Party isn't really an issue.
Okay. So
so now you got 3 left.
The right has about 33% to work with. Maybe they get to 40 if you have the other right wings, 40%, but then
38. The other right 40, is about 5%.
48 between left bloc and Macron's bloc.
Yes.
Okay.
So 48
is
bigger than 38.
Right. Even in France and under the metric system.
Yeah. Okay. So the left announced right after these results that in any given situation where there are 3 candidates running, if the left is in third, they will drop out and not run, throwing their votes to Macron's bloc.
Oh.
And Macron's bloc said, in any situation where there are 3 running and the Macron people are in third, we'll probably drop out and do the same. Maybe. It's up to the individuals. We're not going to tell people what to do.
Oh, well, they're not dictators after all.
They're not dictators, but, we'll probably do something like this.
All right.
So the left is committed to do it. Macron is making noise to do it. And if they do, they will block the far right from getting a majority.
That would be good.
And that would mean that it would be a left bloc Macron coalition, which Macron didn't want. He initially ruled that out at the beginning of calling this election.
Because he's center right.
Yeah.
Not center left. Okay.
Okay. But he'll swallow it in order to prevent the far right from doing it. So Taniel's takeaways roughly lines with polls, far right, in fact, a little bit lower. Left is about what the four parties got separately in early June, but now they're a bloc. And the unity is key to making this work. And, of course, it's terrible for the Macron party, but also better than they could have been, given his party only got 14% in the 3 weeks ago European elections. You have to elect people to sit in the European Parliament.
Right.
And these parties represent, who's going to go. So Macron's party got 14% then, got 20% now. That's better, but still pretty bad.
Yeah. Not where you want to be as prime minister.
So individual Macronists, one of them finished third and told the second place leftist to drop out. It was the only fair thing to do. I mean, to give you an idea, politicians are individual
How's
politicians.
this working?
And you can't make them do this.
Yeah.
But the idea is there, and so we'll see if that's sustainable.
Okay.
So we'll know more next week, but it's not, even though the right did better than anybody would want, except for the right, it's not guaranteed that they wind up with a majority.
Okay. It shouldn't be. And we'll have to keep a close eye on it, but not for very long. You don't have to, because they do their elections very fast, I guess.
Right.
That is
now,
something.
from Israel, Israel once had something called a labor party.
Yeah.
In fact, it used to dominate the country.
Yeah.
And most of the founders were from the Labor Party.
Right.
As of today, the Labor Party doesn't exist.
Oh, well.
Labor Party left-wing Meretz merged into one party to be called, I don't know if they want to do that after this weekend, the Democrats.
Oh. They can do that?
According to the agreement signed by Labor Party Chair Yair Golan, an ex-general, they all are, and Meretz leader Tamar Resnick, this is not a technical merger, but the creation of a brand new party that will operate as a single entity moving forward, and Golan from Labor will be in charge. Additionally, the party, that means Meretz is moderating itself. Additionally, the parties agreed that at least one Meretz delegate would be included down to the fourth place spot in the current Labor Party list, another representative to the 8th place, and so on down to the 12th and 16th places. In other words, Meretz gets 25% of the delegates.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, it's a little complex.
But for that's not really what I want to hone in on.
No?
It's just that for those of us who are old enough, the Labor Party was the Israeli government for so many years.
Yes. And that was, and for many people, it's the idea that they still kind of cling to nostalgically about, well, why did Israel have to take that right turn and, and be controlled by crazy people and do horrific things? We remember the old one, the old, vaguely socialist Israel, which was run by secularists, not by right-wing Haredi parties. That hasn't been true for a long time now, and but that doesn't mean people don't miss it.
Right, and the party representing the myth is now history.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So that's not great. Okay, good point. And as you were describing the parliamentary maneuverings in the French elections, it struck me as sort of a reverse or a mirror image of the Israeli situation, where the prime minister's party is sort of crumbling beneath him, but he's jumping from one piece of flotsam to another in an attempt to stay afloat. It's just that Netanyahu jumped right, and Macron, I guess, at least is indicating that he will be willing to jump left if necessary to stay afloat. And I'd rather they jump left, I guess. But this is how these things happen. How a center-right party finds itself saying, well, it's either lose power at a critical moment or allow myself to be forced in the direction I wasn't intending originally by my coalition partners. And then, depending on how trapped you get there, you'll see what happens.
So the conservatives, the regular old conservative party, was pretty much wiped out in France.
Yeah.
They just don't have any influence anymore.
Just regular, we like things the way they are, people replaced by fascists.
Right, exactly.
Huh.
And in merry old England, in the United Kingdom.
Yes, right.
Today is July 1st.
Right. They vote on the
July 4th.
Excellent day as between us and England.
And it looks like the conservatives, the Tories, are going to get clobbered.
That's what we
and
were
in many
looking
polls,
for at the
they're
time.
finishing third behind the Lib Dems.
Yeah, everybody's reshuffling.
It would probably be the party that feels closest to me if I were there.
Yeah?
And then the Liberals.
Different.
Labor.
Okay.
You know, Labor is basically a center-left party, but more center than left.
Okay.
And Labor is doing what they need to do in order to win, which is moderating. They're not the party of Jeremy Corbyn anymore, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I never really understood that era entirely.
Yeah. So Isabel Hardman, writing in The Spectator, a very conservative magazine. And I always like to look at The Spectator because they have good writing and they have pretty good insight into what's going on in the Tory party.
Okay.
So they write, why is Rishi Sunak proud of his defensive campaign? Rishi Sunak isn't lacking in energy as he goes into his final few days of election campaigning. He is, though, using that energy in some quite futile ways. He spent much of his interview this morning arguing with the way the interviewer phrased questions and getting irritated. He wasn't being given enough time to explain himself on policy areas. That impatience, something Sunak never recognizes in himself, has long been one of his visible flaws. It isn't necessarily the kind of visible flaw that puts voters off a prime minister. The problem for Sunak was not whether he had eaten enough breakfast and was a bit too hangry, but what he could offer up to voters as evidence that backing the Conservatives on Thursday was a good idea. And, of course, he couldn't come up with anything.
Well, that's a bad place to be if you're campaigning and your election is in 3 days.
Right.
Huh.
And so I will finish with these two thoughts from observers. Edward Isaac Dovier from the press point of view, and Matthew Dowd from the center-right, never Trump political point of view. Dovier says lots of Dem leaders and opinion makers who had faith in Biden lost it on Thursday night, but a chunk of those calling for him to go are people who never thought he should run, didn't want him to run, and didn't want him to run again, and are now reveling in their vindication. Which is true.
Yeah. That's
Dowd
true.
said, here's how I think about it. A pyromaniac is trying to replace an elderly fire chief who served the community well as the pyromaniac lights houses on fire. I think the best strategy is not to vote for the pyromaniac.
Well, certainly true. Yeah, I mean, okay. Wow. Thanks for coming on and sharing. This was your first chance to do that. We'll talk again on Wednesday.
Yep.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's 10 o'clock, so people are hanging out at the Supreme Court and biting their nails. Let's see, Chris Geidner says 2-box day at SCOTUS. We all know what that means now. Expecting up to 4 decisions, as he says. There are 4 cases remaining, and so, well, duh. But, there's always the possibility. I mean, where do you go to appeal if they say, well, there's 4 cases remaining, here's 3, bye, and either, well, you got to come back Wednesday for the 4th one, or we're just never going to do it, or, I don't know. Anyway, of course, there's Trump immunity. There's all the cases that Greg ran through. We know the 4. The boxes are coming out, and so now if you keep one eye on the social medias, you'll see what comes up. I don't know whether I can actually do that or not, but I'm going to need probably both of my eyes elsewhere. Let me share with you some of the things that I have parked, some of which bear directly on those stories we've already discussed, and then there are others. I mentioned to you that I had this piece from Heather Cox Richardson, who we've read on the show numerous times in the past. This one sent to me. I had both my parents called me over the weekend, by the way, just in terms of acknowledging where we are post-debate, right? Both parents called, both said, yeah, it was stunning and dismaying and all the things. And I think both of them actually said something along the lines of everything you thought, worse than any situation you could have met. Everything you thought, but it was worse than that. And they're not typically, well, my dad typically is a lot more cautious politically, a lot more, not conservative per se, but cautious and not given to like if I had come along at some point in some previous election and said, yeah, it's almost convention time, and to hell with it. I just found out something very bad about the candidate, and we should reverse course and throw the whole thing open again and have a decided convention to replace the candidate at the top of the ticket. There wasn't much discussion about what to do about vice president, but he would tell me that's impossible. Not that it's impossible, but no, you don't do that. It results in political disaster, electoral disaster. It's not done. There's no procedure by which it could be done legitimately. But that was the level of alarm. It has to be done. And I mean, you can think both things, and you can certainly say this is it may be a disaster in the making, but what else are you going to do? You cannot have a president in charge of the country who can't think straight, if that's what's going on. So that was a bit surprising, to say the least. But what could I say? I hadn't watched the debate, and I wasn't about to either. Anyway, this, though, something my mom sent, and so separately says, well, this was perhaps clarifying, if not exactly calming, though. Heather Cox Richardson, writing in her Substack, Letters from an American, on the 27th, well, it says June 27th up at the top here, but then the dateline of it says the 28th. So maybe she started on late at night and finished after midnight. Tonight was the first debate, that would have been Thursday, of course, between President Joe Biden and presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. And by far the most striking thing about the debate was the overwhelming focus among pundits immediately afterward about Biden's appearance and soft, hoarse voice as he rattled off statistics and events. Virtually unmentioned was the fact that Trump lied and rambled incoherently, ignored questions to say whatever he wanted, refused to acknowledge the events of January 6th, and refused to commit to accepting the result of the 2024 presidential election, finally saying that he would accept it only if it met his standards for fairness. Yes, that, of course, did go unmentioned. Yes, it is, of course, unfair. Yeah, it's also the reason I don't watch the debates, because I know what his position is. And further, I know what the media are likely to do with the fact that he will go on a debate stage and say 10, 15, 35 things that would ordinarily be totally disqualifying for any other candidate. People would be screaming the opposite, that the Republicans need to reverse course and nominate someone else. But this is just Trump being Trump, and there's no stopping him. So I don't know. That's part of the reason I don't watch things like this. But also, it's also ordinarily expected that, Biden may do well, he may do poorly, but he's going to get out there and he's going to say the things that you expect him to say, because that's who he is. And the problem is that he was unable to articulate those things, which makes you worried. I understand. But I'll continue with Richardson here. Immediately after the debate, there were calls for Biden to drop out of the race. But aside from the fact that the only time a presidential candidate has ever done that, in 1968, it threw the race into utter confusion and the president's party lost, Biden needed to demonstrate that his mental capacity is strong in order to push back on the Republicans' insistence that he's incapable of being president. That he did thoroughly. Interesting. Okay. Biden began with a weak start, but hit his stride. This is a much more optimistic view of how things went. Began with a weak start, but hit his stride as the evening wore on. Indeed, he covered his bases too thoroughly, listing the many accomplishments of his administration in such a hurry that he was sometimes hard to understand. In contrast, Trump came out strong, but faded and became less coherent over time. His entire performance was either lies or rambling non sequiturs. He lied so incessantly throughout the evening that it took CNN fact checker Daniel Dale almost 3 minutes, speaking quickly, to get through the list. Trump said that some democratic states allow people to execute babies after they're born, and that every legal scholar wanted Roe versus Wade overturned. Both fantastical lies. He said that the deficit is at its highest level ever, and that the U.S. trade deficit is at its highest ever. Both of these things, of course, happened actually during his administration. He lied that there were no terrorist attacks during his presidency. There were many. He said that Biden wants to quadruple people's taxes, and this, of course, pure fiction, according to Dale, and he lied that his tax cuts paid for themselves. They have, in fact, added trillions of dollars to the national debt. Dale went on. Trump lied that the U.S. has provided more aid to Ukraine than Europe has when it's the other way around. And he was off by close to $100 billion when asked to name the amount that the U.S. has provided to Ukraine. $100 billion off. Okay. He was off by millions when he talked about how many migrants have crossed the border under Biden, and falsely claimed that some of Biden's policies, like funding historically black colleges and universities and reducing the price of insulin to $35 a month, he said those were his accomplishments. I mean, you don't think that he's mentally incompetent to be on the ticket? There is no point in going on because virtually everything he said was a lie. As Jake LaHut of the Daily Beast recorded, he was also all over the map. On January 6th, Trump said, we had a great border. Great border. That's what? On January 6th and the border together, and it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8-word sentence. On January 6th, we had a great border. Now, to explain how he would combat opioid addiction, remember that was actually one of his things that he wanted to make a priority, too. He made Kellyanne Conway like czar of that, and then he decided that maybe Jared should be czar of that as well, or instead, I don't remember. But so what about opioid addiction? Well, he veered off into talking points about immigration and said his administration bought the best dog. Is that supposed to be like, is it a drug sniffing dog, a immigrant hunting dog? I don't really know what that was going, because I didn't watch the debate. I don't know, but tell me about opioid addiction, how you'll combat that. Well, immigration, something. We bought the best dog. Okay. He boasted, of course, as usual, he always does this one. He boasted about acing a cognitive test, which he didn't do, and that he just recently had won 2 golf club tournaments, which is no kind of qualification for president, but I guess that's supposed to be, well, I'm physically still able to do it. You can't shuffle around and win golf tournaments unless, of course, you own the golf clubs at which the tournaments are being held, which is exactly the case, right? He boasted about winning 2 golf club tournaments without mentioning they were at his own golf courses. And by way of qualifications, how is it that you think that's qualification for president? Well, to do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. I can do it. As LaHut recorded, Trump said this: clean water and air. We had it. We had the H2O, best numbers ever. And we were using all forms of energy during my 4 years. Best environmental numbers ever. They gave me the statistic before I walked on stage, actually. Okay. Who's out of it? I mean, I guess ultimately, well, Biden used to be better than that, and he had a terrible performance. Trump was never actually better than that and has been uniformly terrible. So I guess Biden loses in all this. Trump actually also directly accused Biden of his own failings. Every accusation is a confession. And so here it is, both backwards and forwards. He also not only claimed Biden's accomplishments as his own, but accused Biden of his own failings and claimed Biden's own strengths, saying, for example, that Biden, who has enacted the most sweeping legislation of any president since at least Lyndon Johnson, couldn't get anything done, while he, who had accomplished only tax cuts, was more effective. He responded to the calling out of his own criminal convictions by saying that Biden could be a convicted felon. He could be eventually if they ever, found a felony to charge him with and went to trial, etc., and falsely stating, this man is a criminal. Imagine, the chutzpah. And repeatedly Trump called America a failing nation and described it as a hellscape, which is something I've been telling you Republicans have been doing for quite some time, right? America as a hellhole is their platform. I don't know why anyone would vote for that, particularly patriots. It went on, and that was the point. This was not a debate. It was Trump using a technique that actually has a formal name, the Gish Gallop. And I think that was, at one point, we didn't decide that it was a mistake that we did it, but that term, Gish Gallop, to me, so badly wants to be pronounced as Gallop, because I love that, Gnip Gnop, Gish Gallop, that sort of a patter to it, but the Gish Gallop is just difficult. You got to pause to get yourself reset to say Gallop. But anyway, it's something that Greg has told us about for years, and it was very interesting watching the emergence of the re-emergence of the term over the last couple of days, and also very interesting watching people who have been pointing to that for a long time and saying, I've been telling you for a decade that this is what's going on. How is it that you're only just realizing it now? Well, people come around slowly. You got to accept it when they do. Anyway, it went on and on. That was the point. This was Trump using a technique that actually has a formal name, the Gish Gallop, although I suspect he comes by it naturally. It's a rhetorical technique in which someone throws out a fast string of lies, non sequiturs, and specious arguments, so many that it is impossible to fact-check or rebut them in the amount of time it took to say them. Trying to figure out how to respond makes the opponent look confused because they don't know where to start grappling with the flood that's just hit them. It's a form of gaslighting, and it is especially effective on someone with a stutter, as Biden has. That's a good point. It is similar to what Trump did to Biden during a debate in 2020. In that case, though, the lack of muting on the mics left Biden simply saying, will you shut up, man? Everyone remembers that, and it was a comment that resonated with the audience. Giving Biden the enforced space to answer by killing the mic of the person not speaking that night, actually made the technique more effective. There are ways to combat the Gish Gallop by calling it out for what it is, although, honest to God, it needs a better name than that, among other ways. But Biden retreated to trying to give the three pieces of evidence that established his own credentials on the point at hand. His command of those points was notable, but the difference between how he sounded at the debate and how he sounded on stage at a rally in Raleigh, North Carolina, the rally at Raleigh, they didn't use that? They should have. Just an hour, really? I thought it was the next day, but just an hour afterwards suggested that the technique worked on him. That is to say, the debate performance was horrific, but the rally performance actually quite good. That's not ideal, but as Monique Presley put it, the proof of Biden's ability to run the country is the fact that he is running it successfully, not a debate performance against a pathological lying sociopath. Certainly a good point. It doesn't erase the other point, which was, well, you could look a lot better failing to debate a pathological lying sociopath if you look like physically unable to function when having a debate against a pathological lying sociopath. It doesn't matter a great deal in the sense that you're never really going to debate that person. That person won't permit a debate to take place. But you can look like you know where you are and you understand what's going on around you. And if you don't, then people will take note of that. Anyway, back to Heather Cox Richardson saying a much bigger deal is what it says that the television media and pundits so completely bought into Trump's performance. They appear to have accepted Trump's framing of the event, that he is dominant, so fully that the fact Trump unleashed a flood of lies and non sequiturs simply didn't register, or they just don't care. I don't know. And since the format established that the CNN journalists running the debate did not challenge anything either candidate said, and Dale's fact-checking spot came long after the debate ended. The takeaway of the event was a focus on Biden's age rather than on Trump's inability to tell the truth or form a coherent thought. At the end of the evening, pundits were calling not for Trump, a man liable for sexual assault and business fraud, convicted of 34 felonies under 3 other indictments, who lied pathologically, not for him to step down, but for Biden to step down because he looked and sounded old. At 81, Biden is indeed old, but that does not distinguish him much from Trump, who is 78 and whose inability to answer a question should raise concerns about his mental acuity. About the effects of Thursday's events, former Republican operative Stuart Stevens, as where I mentioned this was going to come up, Stuart Stevens warned, don't day trade politics. It's a sucker's game. A guy from Queens out on bail bragged about overturning Roe versus Wade, said in public that he didn't have sex with a porn star, defended tax cuts for billionaires, defended January 6th, and called America the worst country in the world. That guy isn't going to win this race. Trump will clearly have pleased his base tonight, Thursday night again, but Stevens is right to urge people to take a longer view. It's not clear whether Trump or Biden picked up or lost votes. Different polls gave the win to each, and it's far too early to know how that will shake out over time. Of far more lasting importance than this one night is the clear evidence that stage performance has trumped substance in political coverage in our era. 9 years after Trump launched his first campaign, the media continues to let him call the shots. Of course, like I said, more than one thing can be true at once, but definitely well worth taking note of this. Let me check back now that some of the decisions are being released, read, and digested, and Greg is sending some notes on it. That makes it that much easier to take a quick look at. Where do we leave off? I'm trying to find it. Where do we separate from today's preview? And there we go. Moved on to what's been released since. Steve Vladek is someone we always keep an eye on, and he has this to say. Some reminders, right, for the SCOTUS rulings that we expected. Did we not get this one on the air? I guess not. Rulings are announced in reverse seniority order based on who wrote for the court. So that is to say the anything that was written by the chief that he reserved for himself to write and therefore seems to think is among the most important decisions will come out last. Secondly, we don't know whether we're getting 3 rulings or 4 because the 2 net choice cases could be decided together or separately. 3, rulings don't post to the website until justices start reading from the bench, so oral dissents in earlier cases can help to delay things. And 4, my best guesses, but they're just guesses, are that Justice Barrett has one, or the net choice opinion, 1 or 2 of the, I guess, depending on whether they combine the 2. Alito would take corner post, and the chief has Trump. I think Greg snuck that one in before leaving today. And if that holds, we'll get Trump, the immunity case, last or second to last if there's an unsigned ruling in the other net choice case. And then, there's another point here. In other words, folks should try to be patient. It's likely going to take some time. Okay, so some time has passed now. It's 20 minutes. What else is happening? Let's see. The first one comes out, according to Steve Vladek, is the first but not last SCOTUS ruling. Corner post, 6-3. Ideologically divided majority, Justice Barrett holding that, he got that right, that the 6-year statute of limitations for challenging agency regulations doesn't start to run until the plaintiff is injured. So kind of what we were concerned about that one. Justice Jackson saying in dissent, I can enlarge it so I can read it. At the end of a momentous term, this much is clear, the tsunami of lawsuits against agencies that the court's holdings in this case and the Loper-Bright case have authorized has the potential to devastate the functioning of the federal government. Even more to the present point, that result simply cannot be what Congress intended when it enacted legislation that stood up and funded federal agencies. Yeah, they didn't mean that Congress or the courts was going to have to decide every single dispute on an individual basis. Federal agencies should have been empowered to do that so that courts could decide questions of law, not every single individual case of damages, at least not at the Supreme Court level. Certainly the trial courts have the capacity to deal with that. Between this and the Chevron case and, a couple of the decisions that Justice Jackson is pointing out here, courtroom caseloads should, more or less explode, which, by the way, is an excellent opportunity to expand the judiciary and even the Supreme Court. There's no way that Matthew Kaczmarek can handle the flood of cases coming his way. They're going to have to expand that district, that division. Probably going to have to quintuple the number of judges in it. Maybe that'd be an interesting way of undoing some of these single division situations. Let's see, single judge divisions, rather. Steve Vladeck now with more commenting here that Greg has passed along. Justice Kagan has the consolidated ruling in net choice, holding for a unanimous-ish, interesting, court that neither the Fifth Circuit nor the 11th Circuit applied the right test, and remanding for proper application of the standard for facial relief. That doesn't really tell me much. I can't digest that one on the fly, but Steve Vladeck's still working on it, I guess, because his message ends in a colon, so I suppose we've got more to come. All right. So with one eye on the breaking news from the Supreme Court, we turn back to other things that I have set aside for you in pocket, except that, there we go. It's just going to take its sweet time in reloading and go to the homepage instead. All right, yes, it is. I don't know what Steve Bannon's current status is, and I don't know how long he has to report to jail, so it could be that he is already there, but I thought I would remind you of the fact that was happening and remind you of what I said at the outset by way of, pointing out that there's an enormously important thing happening today. Yes, we're worried about Biden and what the debate might mean, but it should be kept in mind that, one, Trump, yes, is a convicted felon, and two, that everyone around him is also convicted of various infractions, including hiding how bad Donald Trump's infractions actually are, that Steve Bannon is, in fact, opting to go to jail rather than admit to the world what Donald Trump was really up to and what he was really doing on January 6th, among other things. But Steve Bannon, who is not Steve Bannon, who points that out in his tweets about his article today, writes, "Team of felons, out of options, Steve Bannon reports to prison." As he does so, a historian's line comes to mind. With Lincoln, they had a team of rivals. With Trump, you have a team of felons. I don't think that, they didn't say that a long time ago. But there was the team of rivals. I don't know. It seems like a good phrase, and it has stuck. I don't know if it really meant as much as they thought. Anyway, but 2 years ago this month, Steve begins, a jury of the nation in the nation's capital found Steve Bannon guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress. In the 24 months that followed, the right-wing operative / podcaster explored every possible legal avenue in hopes of avoiding incarceration, just as the other right-wing operative / podcaster Alex Jones explored every possible legal avenue in hopes of avoiding liability for his big mouth and the damage it has caused. They just run and go to the ends of the earth to try to avoid actually taking, responsibility. This is the voices of the party of responsibility, party of personal responsibility, right? Anything they can do, up to and including an emergency application to the Supreme Court. Please let me out. Please don't put me in prison. And having the Republican Speaker of the House attempt to maneuver in a way that would seek to essentially dismiss the charges against him. Contempt of Congress. I'm Congress now, and I love him. He just has, whether he has contempt for us or not doesn't bother me. Well, anyway, Steve Bannon compiling the record on Steve Bannon. And it does so this way. Let's see. When the Supreme Court rejected his last-minute bid late last week, Bannon ran out of options. And let's see. Oh, where are we here? I got to get ready for our next break. Bannon ran out of options, and the Associated Press reported overnight, longtime Trump ally Steve Bannon is scheduled to report to a federal prison in Connecticut on Monday to serve a 4-month sentence on contempt charges for defying a subpoena in the congressional investigation into the U.S. Capitol attack. The judge has allowed Bannon to stay free for nearly 2 years while he appealed, but ordered him to report to prison on Monday after an appeals court panel upheld his contempt of Congress convictions, and the Supreme Court declined to get involved. But wait until you get the listing of other people going to jail. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Still more coming in from the Supreme Court watchers. Steve Vladeck, we left off in our last update, now has this to add. Just to be clear, that the net choice rulings leaves the district court injunctions against both Florida's and Texas's social media content moderation laws intact. That is, the laws stay blocked. And remember, what we're talking about here are Florida and Texas Republican-dominated governments passing laws essentially seeking to force the social media groups to give up their preferred methodologies of regulating content in favor of what these two Republican governments insisted would be fairer to conservatives. That is to say, largely because online conservatives spend their time advocating for either the overthrow of democracy or the American government, or for various other pro-Nazi policies, essentially, for the social media groups to regulate against the proliferation of hate speech and insurrectionist speech, not to mention also COVID denialism, et cetera, anti-vax sentiment, and also making for an atmosphere in general amenable to sexual harassment and predatory practices against children, and for the social media groups to prevent that. Well, because this is chiefly the domain of online right-wing activists and influencers, they feel that enforcing laws against child pornography, hate crimes, and insurrection is anti-conservative. And so the state conservative governments were seeking to block these private entities from being able to regulate content displayed on their sites that evidence this strange proclivity among Republicans and conservatives. And the conservatives, the quote-unquote conservatives, said, no, we need to be able to use the power of the government that we control to force these private entities to display our preferred interests and policies, etc. And so we're going to use the leverage of government to force these, remember when they used to be in favor of allowing private entities to do pretty much whatever they wanted. Now they're going to use the government to force these private entities to do their bidding instead. So the court stepped in and said, no, actually, these things are untenable. We can't make these laws work, and blocking the enforcement of these statutes, and that stays intact. So, as he says, just to be clear, the ruling leaves the district court injunctions against both Florida and Texas's social media content moderation laws intact so that the laws stay blocked, while sending the cases back to the 11th and 5th circuits for further proceedings. What's interesting here is now quoting from Justice Kagan's opinion here, saying, there has been enough litigation already to know that the Fifth Circuit, if it stayed the course, would get it wrong on at least one significant input into the facial analysis. Let's see, Josh Dean collecting this other quote from Kagan. It is necessary to say more about how the First Amendment relates to the law's content moderation provisions. That need is especially stark for the Fifth Circuit, whose decision rested on a serious misunderstanding of First Amendment precedent and principle. Yeah, so, I mean, that's a pretty good smack. It's just basically the court ending the term with, the Fifth Circuit is out of control and doesn't know what the F is going on, and we're kind of sick of it, and they haven't gotten a case right in decades. What the hell's going on with you idiots? So, that is fairly strong. All right. Let's see. Some immunity case stuff here. That now coming out and scaring the hell out of everybody. He sent me a screen grab from Anthony Michael Kreis, Kreis. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Supreme Court case, of course, Trump versus United States. Roberts writing, I guess, for the court. A former president to absolute immunity. Something missing here. He's typing very quickly. But a former president, absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. There is no immunity for unofficial acts. That's sort of a split the baby sort of thing. 6-3, liberals dissent. So it sounds like he's opening the door here for, Trump's argument was always that those things were official acts. His January 6th activity. Wow, I was stopping the big steal, as opposed to, I was carrying out a ministerial function of government, so now there'll be an argument over whether or not his activity was official enough to qualify for this weird immunity that Roberts imagines. The first step, in the quote here, the first step in deciding whether a former president is entitled to immunity from a particular prosecution is to distinguish his official from unofficial actions. In this case, okay, drumroll, no court thus far has drawn that distinction. In general, or with respect to the conduct alleged in particular, it is therefore incumbent upon the court to be mindful that it is a court of final review and not first view. This is a quote from Zivotofsky versus Clinton, and if you're not familiar with the case, as I'm not, tells us next to nothing. Critical threshold issues in this case are how to differentiate between how to differentiate between a president's official and unofficial actions, and how to do so with respect to the indictment's extensive and detailed allegations covering a broad range of conduct. The court offers guidance on those issues, do they? I guess we'll wait and see what that guidance is supposed to be and decide how disastrous the decision actually is. All right, let's see. Other things I wanted to share with you while we're waiting for more digestion, and we may have to wait until tomorrow to get a really clear picture, at least on the immunity case. But that'll be fine. Something to discuss tomorrow. Something Joan will no doubt have something to say about as well. There are a couple other items. There was, of course, the Philadelphia Inquirer editorial, who actually, as Greg pointed out, was the only paper in the country to actually call on the correct person to drop out of the contest. Can I read all the way through this thing? I guess so. It's available to us. To serve his country, they wrote, Donald Trump should leave the race. Ah, yes. Okay. Well, I mean, if he's at all capable of serving the country, even by that. Yeah, but it certainly does us better if he leaves the race. Biden had a horrible night Thursday, but the debate is misplaced. The only person who should be withdrawing from the race is Trump. The entire editorial board signs on to this one. President Joe Biden's debate performance was a disaster. His disjointed responses and dazed look sparked calls for him to drop out of the presidential race. But lost in the hand-wringing was Donald Trump's usual bombastic litany of lies, hyperbole, bigotry, ignorance, and fear-mongering. Oh, that's right. I forgot. I still have Steve Bannon's article to get through. Dang. All right. Well, let's continue on with this one. His performance demonstrated once again that he is a danger to democracy and unfit for office. In fact, the debate about the debate is misplaced. The only person who should withdraw from the race is Trump. Trump, at 78, has been on the political stage for 8 years, marked by chaos, corruption, and incivility. Why go back to that? To build himself up, Trump constantly tears the country down. There is no shining city on the hill. It's just mourning, mourning, in America. Throughout the debate, that's interesting, by the way, as I was thinking about it here, the parallel to online, the pickup artists and the male influencers and their stupid technique, their supposed dating technique of negging that they tell the young fellas today, right? If you're flirting with a young woman, or flirting with anybody. I guess if you're flirting with an old woman, I don't know if it'll work so well on her necessarily, or anyway. But the technique of negging, like you say negative things about her, try to sort of tear her down, and then but then build her back up as you approach the I've negged you, et cetera, but that's just to knock you down a peg and then make you feel like somehow you should give me your number when I ask for it and should accept my invitation out on a date because, after all these terrible things are true about you, and yet I like you anyway. I don't really recognize why that's supposed to work, but it is something that they do, and they do advocate, and it's kind of like this. To build himself up, Trump constantly tears the country down, and but it's something Republicans have done for a long time. America is a hellhole. We've said it a million times. Throughout the debate, Trump repeatedly said that we are a, quote, failing country. He called the United States a third world nation. He said we're living in hell and very close to World War III. People are dying all over the place, Trump said, later adding, we're literally an uncivilized country now. Trump told more than 30 lies during the debate, to go with the more than 30,000 mistruths told during his 4 years as president. He dodged the CNN moderator's questions, took no responsibility for his actions, and blamed others, mainly Biden, for everything that is wrong in the world. Trump's response to the January 6th insurrection he fueled was farcical. He said a relatively small number of people went to the Capitol and many were ushered in by the police. Still lying about that. After scheming to overturn the 2020 election, Trump refused to say if he would accept the results of the 2024 election unless, of course, he wins. The debate served as a reminder of what another 4 years of Trump would look like. More lies, grievance, narcissism, and hate. Supporters say they like Trump because he says whatever he thinks, but he mainly spews raw sewage. Trump attacks the military. He denigrates the Justice Department and judges. He belittles the FBI and the CIA. He picks fights with allies and cozies up to dictators. Trump is an unserious carnival barker running for the most serious job in the world. During his last term, Trump served himself and not the American people. Trump spent chunks of time watching TV, tweeting, and hanging out at his country clubs. Over his 4-year term, Trump played roughly 261 rounds of golf, in case you needed a reminder about that. As president, Trump didn't read the daily intelligence briefs. He continued to use his personal cell phone, allowing Chinese spies to listen to his calls. During one Oval Office meeting, Trump shared highly classified intelligence with the Russian foreign minister and ambassador. Trump's term did plenty of damage and had few accomplishments. The much-hyped wall didn't get built. I don't know how you survive that whole thing. That was 100% everything he was about, and it just didn't happen because he sucks. He's an idiot, a clown, can't do things. Infrastructure Week was a recurring joke. Giant tax cuts made the rich richer while fueling massive deficits for others to pay for years. His support for coal, oil drilling, and withdrawal from the Paris Agreement worsened the growing impact of climate change. Did you think it was hot this weekend? Trump stacked the judiciary with extreme judges consisting mainly of white males, including a number who the American Bar Association rated as not qualified. A record number of cabinet officials were fired or left the office. The West Wing was in constant chaos and infighting. Many Trump appointees exited under a cloud of corruption, grifting, and ethical scandals. Trump's children made millions off the White House. His dilettante son-in-law got a $2 billion, $2 billion bribe, gratuity if you wish, from the Saudi government for his fledgling investment firm, even though he never managed money before. Trump's mismanagement of the pandemic resulted in tens of thousands of needless deaths. He boasts about stacking the Supreme Court with extreme right-wingers who are stripping away individual rights, upending legal precedents, and making the country less safe. If elected, Trump may add to the court's conservative majority. Of course, there were the unprecedented 2 impeachments. Now Trump is a convicted felon who is staring at 3 more criminal indictments. He's running for president to stay out of prison. That's working out great over in Israel, by the way. If anything, Trump doesn't deserve to be on the presidential debate stage. Why even give him a platform? Trump allegedly stole classified information and tried to overturn an election. His plans for a second term are worse than the last one. We cannot be serious about letting such a crooked clown back in the White House. Yes, Biden had a horrible night. He's 81, and he's not as sharp as he used to be. But Biden on his worst day remains light years better than Trump at his best. Biden must show that he's up to the job. This much is clear. He has a substantive record of real accomplishments, fighting the pandemic, combating climate change, investing in infrastructure, supporting working families and the most vulnerable. Biden has surrounded himself with experienced people who take public service seriously. He has passed major bipartisan legislation despite a dysfunctional Republican House majority. Biden believes in the best of America. He has rebuilt relationships with the allies around the world and stood up to foes like Russia and China. There was only one person at the debate who does not deserve to be running for president. The sooner Trump exits the stage, the better off the country will be. Well, they stand alone in being willing to say so, even though I think probably every editorial board and even every person who's calling for Biden to step aside also agrees with all of that. It's, that's kind of where we stand. I want to double back and go back to Steve Bannon's article about Steve Bannon, just because it also contains an important list to run through. I had left off by reading the piece from the Associated Press reporting on how Bannon is scheduled to report to prison on Monday. And that was way back in September of 2021, the piece continues, when the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack first sent Bannon a subpoena. Just background here. Even at the time, the seriousness was obvious. The podcaster, Bannon, was told that this was a legal summons, not a suggestion, and that failure to comply opened the door to meaningful legal consequences. We said it right at the outset, right? Bannon nevertheless refused to cooperate. The House then approved a resolution finding the GOP operative in contempt of Congress and referred the matter to the Justice Department, which indicted the former White House strategist. A jury later convicted Bannon. His lawyers struggled to present much of a defense, ultimately leading to his prison sentence, which was imposed by a Trump-appointed judge, by the way. Congressional Republicans launched an 11th hour bid to rescue him from legal accountability, but it proved inconsequential. They don't know what they're doing either. It's against this backdrop that a recent memorable quote comes to mind. With Lincoln, they had a team of rivals. Presidential historian Douglas Brinkley told USA Today in May, with Trump, you have a team of felons. In fact, now seems like a good time to update the big list. And it also pays to keep in mind that many of these people went to jail so that the American public would never get a clear accounting of what Trump did in all of these situations. So, I mean, to the extent that we say, well, we don't have hard evidence that Trump ordered this, that, or the other thing. True in many cases. Can you draw an inference from these things? Well, yeah, legally you are permitted to do so. So if it ever comes to a jury trial, they can point this out. And one of the things they'll almost assuredly tell the jury is the reason you don't have a clearer picture of what Trump ordered is that everybody who knows volunteered to go to jail instead rather than face up to the truth. But here's part of the list for people who went to jail for that and for other reasons who are associated with Trump and the Trump administration. Donald Trump himself, of course, charged, convicted, and awaiting sentencing. It is 10 days. 10 days until he is sentenced for his felony convictions in New York. Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, forgot to mention him earlier, was charged, convicted, and sentenced to prison. Trump's former campaign vice chairman, Rick Gates, was charged, convicted, and sentenced to prison. Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, was charged, convicted, and is reporting to prison today. He was also charged, by the way, not just in this case, but in connection with a scheme to defraud, but escaped federal trial as a result of a Trump pardon. He is also facing a related state trial on wire fraud and money laundering charges. That he escaped the federal charges on that same set of circumstances because of a pardon. He's also facing an upcoming trial on wire fraud and money laundering charges. Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, charged, convicted, sentenced to prison. Trump's former advisor and former campaign aide, Roger Stone, charged, convicted, sentenced to prison. Trump's former advisor and White House aide, Peter Navarro, charged, convicted, currently in prison. Trump's former campaign advisor, George Papadopoulos, charged, convicted, sentenced to prison. The Trump Organization's former CFO, Alan Weisselberg, charged, convicted, sentenced to prison. Trump's former White House National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, charged and convicted, but pardoned at the last minute, though he was later acquitted at trial. Here's one, a new one, right? Acquitted. Trump's former inaugural committee chair, Tom Barrack, charged with illegal lobbying of Trump on behalf of a foreign government. Elliot Broidy, the vice chair of Trump's inaugural committee, and he himself found guilty, found at the center of multiple controversies and also pled guilty to federal charges related to illegal lobbying. Two lawyers associated with Trump's post-defeat efforts, Kenneth Chesebro and Sidney Powell, have both pleaded guilty to election-related crimes. And did I mention that the former president's business was itself found guilty of tax fraud? Because it was. This does not include the fact that a jury held Trump liable for sexual abuse in a civil case. It also doesn't include the fake electors who've been charged in jurisdictions across the country, or the Republican National Committee's election integrity lawyer, who was recently indicted on election-related crimes. To be sure, some of the aforementioned men were ultimately pardoned by Trump, who doled out pardons as if they were party favors before exiting this Oval Office. But this doesn't change the scope of the broader picture. The number of people in the Republicans' orbit who've been convicted of crimes in recent years is so great, the Washington Post once described it as the remarkable universe of criminality surrounding the former president. That was 5 years ago. And it's even more remarkable now. But Biden's old, so he should drop out. So there you go. I thought that was an important listing and an important telling factor in, I guess, why Trump remains free today. And now that the immunity case has been issued, we'll have to wait and see how Judge Aileen Cannon in Florida and Judge Tanya Chutkan in D.C. opt to proceed at this point. I mean, I guess now the door's open if they want to just step on the gas, but I don't know that anybody's going to try and do. Although, in this stage of the game, why not? We're at the point where the national punditry is calling for a replacement on the Democratic ticket and the chaos that'll ensue. Well, why not? What if the Republican nominee was embroiled in criminal trial during October and early November and had to take time out from the national election campaign trail to sit as a criminal defendant in Washington, D.C. and or Florida and be tried for stealing national security documents and trying to overthrow the federal government on January 6th. You know, it would be appropriate in my view. Look, there's disruption all over the place. You can't cry about this. Lots of people are having to deal with problems in the last minute. Sorry, can't help you with that one. All right. Let's see. Oh, by way of follow-up here, just because we mentioned it a couple of days, weeks ago, a follow-up from Business Insider. Trump's New Jersey Golf Club liquor licenses, which were in Donald Trump Jr.'s name, apparently not going to help him. Hiding behind his son isn't helping as the state moves to revoke. So that's kind of exciting. This was end of last week as well. The liquor licenses are in his eldest son's name, but that's not going to be enough, it looks like. Anyway, I guess there's still a pending decision, but according to records obtained by Business Insider, on Friday, state officials said Trump's new felony record bars him from profiting from those licenses, and they announced that they will not renew the licenses for Trump National Bedminster and Trump National Golf Club in Colts Neck due to last month's, well, now 2 months ago, because we're in July here, felony hush money conviction. So the two clubs can continue to serve alcohol pending a July 19th hearing on the two licenses, which expires on Sunday. So right now the licenses are expired, but we'll see whether they can continue pending the July 19th hearing, that coming 8 days after his criminal sentencing. So we'll see how that impacts things. All right, just wanted to let you know what was going on with that. You can still get a drink there apparently, even though they're without licenses. And in case you were interested in follow up and whether or not they were going to find some technicality to allow them to continue. They have found that technicality to allow them to continue. But July 19th is that minor issue proceeds to a hearing. All right, let's see. We definitely don't have time to get all the way through some of these other things. And so let's see, what can I squeeze in headline-wise and all this? Oh, probably nothing. So we'll be back tomorrow, of course, and we'll be discussing this and much more, I am sure, with Joan McCarter, who will have plenty to say about these things. And we'll have more to say about them as well. It will be very interesting next couple of days to see how things shake out and whether things settle down. It was rather remarkable reading through that list of people who have been sentenced to, who've been convicted from the Trump administration. And there are more, and there are certainly more that had to leave under an ethical cloud as well. But, yeah, I mean, at least, the story of the day still needs to be that Steve Bannon has opted. He'd rather go to jail than admit what the truth is about January 6th. That's a pretty serious hole in the record of the guy who's running for president this time around. And you don't know. You have next to no. We know plenty about things that make him look horrible and a totally inappropriate choice for president. But we don't know the full story because people would rather spend 4 months in prison than admit what they know about the guy, which is amazing. And anyway, he's got a hell of a record of criminality and lying and deceitfulness and possible treason and giving away national security secrets. It's really kind of astonishing that that's the case. I was here's something. I was wondering, I guess now that I'm still kind of wondering how the punditry will shake out in terms of, well, shouldn't you all at the very minimum be covering the bases like the Philadelphia Inquirer did? Look, it's possible to think that more than one person needs to drop out of the race, I guess, but you should go on the record and say, what Trump is up to and what he's been like and how inappropriate a choice he really is. You should at least put that out there. And I was kind of wondering, like, what does it take, given the listing of all these things, for people to come to this realization? And in the dark spaces over the weekend, I was wondering, and maybe you've been down this path too. So I'll leave you with this one. I was wondering whether there was, as we've wondered a number of times, is there anything Trump could do that would just universally be recognized as, nope, that can't happen. We cannot have a person like that on the ticket. And that, years ago it was, you can't say those sorts of things about John McCain. You can't say those sorts of things about veterans. You can't say that people who volunteer for the military are suckers. Why would you die for your country? You're an idiot. Oh my God. He definitely can't run for president, right? No, he absolutely can. And any number of things. And in the middle of a pandemic, don't wear your mask. Go to church on Easter. It'll be great. Inject disinfectant. All those things. There's just nothing. And I began to wonder, what would be the sort of thing that you would think would be like, no, that absolutely is unacceptable. What if I am not? There's no reason in the world to believe this, except for the fact that, people do these things. But what if, instead of saying, Russia, are you listening? If you're listening, it would be great to have Hillary Clinton's emails. What if it was instead, what would be great? It would be great if the thing that you do with the polonium were to happen, like right in front of the debate there. What would you do if you found out that the story was, whether you found out now or months later, actually somebody broke into, the room where Biden was going to be preparing himself for the debate and poisoned his water? Did it happen? No, I have no evidence for that. Don't worry about that. But if you were to find that story out, and then the press were to say, well, it's too late now, the guy's been nominated, we're just going to have to go ahead with it with a normal election. And just as they're doing now, he lies his ass off about everything. Well, we're just going to have to let Trump be Trump. Would that work for something that crazy?
To Kagro in the morning.
I don't know.
David Waldman.
But I have a feeling that it would come out almost no different from what we experience on a day-to-day basis with his press coverage now. I don't know. Something to think about. Something to think about while you're waiting for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next right here on Netroots Radio. Justice Putnam takes you for the next hour with his take on all of this insanity. We'll see you tomorrow.